Welcome to week 6 of your curriculum instruction and assessment course, and we are looking at assessments, a deep dive into those. So today's agenda is we are looking at norm reference tests versus criterion reference testing. Then we're going to review formative and summative assessments, then authentic assessments, grading and evaluation, and then No Child Left Behind and Every Student Success Act, because we need to know those as we serve our students. So first is really understanding those testing information. Once you have given your test, and just to see, are you ranking the students? So this way you can see your top ones. How can you make them excel and make them really elaborate more on that subject, while your lower ones, you might have to reteach or refocus how they can be successful. So kind of ranking them, and you might not put them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that's to see kind of where they are. And then criterion is just looking at the proficiency. So usually I did 70% or higher. If they were 70% or higher, then in my head, that's proficient. I did not do A, B, C, D, or F just because I wanted them to perform above 70% to make sure that they scored either that 4 or 5 on their end of grade testing. So these are 2 great ways to really evaluate where your students are and how to further extend their knowledge with the norm or reteach, but also to see where they are proficiency-wise. Now let's review some of that formative and summative assessment. So formative should just be those quick little things as you're walking around, those exit tickets, just seeing where they are. If your principal came up to you and said, "How's Jake doing in your class?" You should be able to tell right off the bat, like, he's doing well in this, he needs help in that. It's just, you should know your students kind of like the back of your hand. Summative are much more in depth. I think of them more as formal. Those are usually state tests or your unit tests. Those are ones that are going in the grade book every time. Formative are those quick checks just to see where they are, what I need to adjust as a teacher, and so that they can be successful. Now we're going to look at types of assessments. So you are probably used to objective tests, which are true, false, matching, multiple choice. That's probably the easiest way and most common, but those are very black and white. You don't really have any flux of, well, it could be this one or this one, and you don't fully understand their depth of knowledge. Standardized tests, I think of those as teachers are much more of the administrators, because they're given these assessments without them seeing them so that they can truly prepare. And these standardized tests are not usually made by one specific teacher. They're usually either collective among the grade level, the county, or given by the state, meaning end of grade tests or end of course tests. Essay, these are great, but are a little bit harder to grade just because they're not black and white. So you have extended and restricted response. So extended is more elaborate and they're much more open-ended. So like compare and contrast, you have to do multiple things in them. And restricted is a little bit more like telling about something. These are, again, a little bit more challenging to grade. That's where rubric really comes in, of making sure that the students understand how they are going to be assessed. Then performance assessments. This is there's a huge range of these, meaning you could do a lab, you could make them create something. These could be, I have an example of one that I did later on. This could be making a product, a presentation, kind of like this, but it's much more open-ended and it makes them think more complex cognitively. Then a portfolio is planned collection of learner achievement. So usually you have multiple things that go in there. I haven't seen this as much in the classroom just because it's a lot to organize and take care of. I mean, I think of this more as like art or music or one of those performance sort of classes. So those are the different types of assessments. Now we're going to look at, thinking about an assessment, are these authentic? So when you're thinking of an assessment, they should have a variety of questions. So not just define something. It should be compare and contrast, all those different taxonomy of questions. So thinking back a few weeks ago of how we looked at questions. Then does it relate to the concept you're being taught? So you should not be asking random questions. It needs to be related to what you are teaching right then. Then success indicator aligns with standard. So if you need your students to understand volume, are you asking them about volume questions and how they are being taught aligns with the standard? Those go kind of hand in hand, but you don't want to ask your students to create buildings for volume when they just need to know how to find volume. And then validity and reliability, those we're going to go into next. So making sure that they're valid and reliable. So validity has several different components. So validity is, does the test measure what it's supposed to measure? So content validity is established by examining a test's contents to ensure that it covers what is intended. So you don't just focus on one little thing, but have taught all of this. It needs to really encompass what you've talked about. And then, so there's two more. So the next one is established when an established test is administered at the same time as a new test you've designed. So making sure that there's not an overlap. And then predictive validity, is established when a test accurately predicts some future behaviors of the examinee that is represented of the test content. So really understanding what this could predict for the next test or some of the behaviors students have on it. So are they missing part of a skill, or do you need to reteach something? Kind of really understanding, is this test valid? And sometimes you even look at, is this question valid? There was times that I was like, holy cow, most of the students missed this one. Did I not teach this well, or is it a bad question? So you have to go back. And that's where the reliability comes in. So does this test yield the same or similar scores consistently? So if I were to retest them, would they get relatively the same if I haven't retaught or anything like that? Alternative forms. So looking at different groups and the correlation between these two sets. And then internal consistency measures a single concept ought to be related or correlated with each other. So the learners who get one item correct will likely get other ones correct as well. So if you're looking at the area, if the student knows what area is, then they'll most likely get these area questions correct. Next is grading. So there is a multitude of ways to grade. I'm not going to read all of this and bore you with that, and you can read it and kind of pause this. But making sure that when you are grading, it is very black and white. Yes, you have other things that might not be black and white. Say it's a project or the other ones that we've talked about previously, but you need to be consistent, because if not, it will hinder students from being successful, and it might cause an uproar in your class. So with your multiple choice or objective teaching, that's very black and white. Now, if I had more of a project or something that they were doing, especially in science or social studies, I would make sure that I had a rubric. So here's on the next one. Here is a rubric that I used. Literally, I took a screenshot of it. So they had to create a PowerPoint that talked about their colonial times with the social roles. So when I assigned them the project, I also went over this rubric just to make sure that they knew how they were getting their grade. I even put to the side, identified 3 social classes, so 3 points. So once you know what you're wanting them to create, then you can put point values. So if they missed one, clearly I was only giving them 2 points. So it kind of goes along with it. But this way they were able to kind of self-grade before they shared the Google Slides with me. And all I did was print these out. And while I went through their slides, I was grading them. And then I gave them back this little slip of paper so they could see their grade. And I would put notes of like, I took off these points because you missed this, and that sort of thing. So rubrics really help. And oftentimes we see the rubrics as in like these big things that have different ones. I like these better just because it's less reading to do. And it's very, I think, as black and white as you can possibly get with a non-black and white activity. So this is just an example that I use for a project. Now, the last component is making sure that students really get the education and get the content that they need. So No Child Left Behind was established a long time ago by President Bush. And now Obama has changed it while he was president to Every Student Success Act. So basically these were built on 4 pillars. So accountability for results, meaning that's more of for teachers, of if all these students are failing, why? What does that look like as a teacher? Then emphasis on doing what works best on scientific research. So not just teaching random ways, but really looking at cooperative learning, all of those things that we've talked about that are research-based. Expanding parental options, so making sure that we are informing parents of where their students are, and then expanding local control and flexibility. So that's more of like the state level of making sure that we understand what is known in North Carolina. And then RTI is a huge push. This is where you can kind of screen students. I did it a lot. It's mostly in math and reading. It's not done in science just because students are able to grasp those a little bit more. But this is where you start to do interventions. If you see a student falling below grade level, you start doing interventions or screenings, formative assessments to see where they are. So I got these sheets off of commoncoresheets.com, and I would have them do like 3 or 4 questions at a time. And you could see them progress. And if they were getting the skill, great, we moved on. If they weren't, then I would reteach. And that was my quick way of doing RTI in my classroom, because we had to track for any student that was scoring below grade level. Did they enjoy it? Not really, but it really was an accountability thing for me, because at the end of the year, I had to show that I was doing interventions with these students that were on their level opposed to grade level, and they were able to further learn. So this week we dived a little bit more into assessments. So hopefully you're looking at assessments in a different way, not just tests, but really understanding them. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I hope you have a great week.